Hey, hello friends. Let me turn on some lights here. And welcome, introduce you to Daily Art Adventure number, whoops, is that in the right place? There we go, 774. One more and we'll be 3/4 of the way to 1,000. Can you believe it? Can I believe it? And hello. Hello, David. Hello, Barbara. Hello, Vista. New watcher, new commenter anyway. Thank you for joining us. Hello, Uncle 60. All right, so today is, and I'm going to move you right away. Forgive me while I blind you for just a second and put you on a much better viewpoint. There we go. So I've got an assignment to do an illustration. This is, I thought I was done with this job, but heard from my client last week and he said, can you do one more? So let me show you some of the earlier illustrations that I've done for this book, so you can get a feel for the style, the finished style. This one I was not as happy with. We didn't use it. This was aimed at a more juvenile children's audience, and we decided not to go in that direction. This one I was happy with. I'm not sure this is the one we used, but this is probably my favorite. So in a minute, I'm going to describe the technique. This is a bone shattered by a Minié ball. There's a Minié ball, Civil War, cause of all kinds of horror, etc. So this book is a biography of this man. Boy, grew up to be a man. Here he is after the war with a shattered hip bone, bone shattered by a Minié ball. And he went on to found a big company in South Carolina, a college, university in South Carolina. And he's one of, you'd say, South Carolina's favorite sons, if you will. And I'm writing this book for his great-grandson is doing a biography. I believe it's great-grandson. He's doing a biography of his great-grandfather. So let me turn on these lights. So the technique is, if some of you've been following me for a long time, you might remember a year or two ago when I did a series of videos. It's still a playlist on my channel where I learned more or less learned the technique of a very famous, my pencil's just breaking, very famous American illustrator named C.F. or Chris Payne. And I took some pains, yuck, to explore his technique, his approach. You can Google him, just C.F. Payne. Very, very famous. He did the covers of the back cover of the Reader's Digest for a number of years. And he's done the front cover of Time magazine and so on and so forth many times. So you've probably seen his work. Well, his name is C.F. Payne. Part of what prompted me to do such a thing is I actually knew Chris before he was uber famous, shall we say. I met him at the Dallas Society of Illustrators. I explain all this in my videos when I'm exploring his technique. All right, enough of that. So enough of the person. Let me tell you what his technique is. Starts out, as you can see here, with colored pencil, black colored pencil, doing a fairly simple line drawing with some shading, like this. There's some shading. Here's some more shading. On top of this, I'm going to put a translucent layer of acrylic on top, and then I'm going to spray it with a fixative. Wait, no, I don't spray it yet. On top of the acrylic, I'm going to do a watercolor wash over the entire thing and then lift out the wash. Some of this is not going to make much sense to you till you see me do it. And then at that point, for this particular job, I'm deviating. So this is not a dead copy of Chris Payne's technique. This is a modification, for better or worse. And since he's the one who's uber famous, I suppose you'd have to say, well, it's probably for worse. Why didn't you just copy him all the way? Well, because I'm an artist and I just can't stand to copy people, really. Anyway, I finished then with pastel. So the story here is, this is, the illustration here is late in Major Coker's life. He was the founder of this college, and at the time I believe it was a girls' school in South Carolina. And part of the story is he would periodically get out his big rig, which is what they called this three-seater, 3 rows, 3 benches, and he would take the girls on rides in his big. So that's what this is illustrating. Fair enough? I can't help think about a Surrey with a fringe on top. So I'm okay, I think I'm done tracing. So here is the, just for what it's worth, here's the pencil sketch that I sent to my client. And Major Coker. I never thought about how funny that was, Karen. There's my pencil sketch, and I blew it up a little bit, wanted it bigger, and taped it to the back of this. I can take this off now. I'm working on single ply Bristol board. So a fairly stout paper, but I wanted it to be transparent enough. That glove is dirty. I wanted it to be transparent enough so that I could see through it, so I could trace. So that's why I'm using single ply, not double or triple ply Bristol board. Oh, I do want to show you one more thing before I finish with the drawing, and that's this wheel needs to be finished. Sorry about that. Okay, hang on just a second. So erasing my dirty marks. So again, for those of you who won't be able to stick with me, let me describe again the steps. Prismacolor, black pencil, translucent acrylic, sort of flat colors, no roundedness, flat colors. Then brown watercolor with a big brush across the whole thing. And then I lift out watercolor with Q-tips and brushes and tissues and so forth. Then I spray it with a very toothy, not just a normal workable fixative, much more stout than that. And then finish in pastel. All right, let me finish the shading. So all these girls are in the shade. So one of the interesting things about this technique, there's several things that are interesting about it, but one of the things is that right now it's a very liney illustration. But as soon as I put a translucent acrylic gouache over the whole thing, much of that lininess will be diminished. So as you can see, I'm not being too terribly careful in my drawing. And I think too, if I were doing a full-on Chris Payne copy, then I might be a little more careful, but I'm not. All right. I thought, well, this is the kind of thing I've never shown to you guys. This is harkens back to my days as a freelance illustrator. These tools, some of the tools, and it's amazing I still have them, isn't it? Obviously, I still occasionally get called upon, as you can see, to do illustrations. Now, I did not use an ellipse. I did not use a template for this, and then after I did it, I thought, I wish I had. And this wheel's supposed to be coming toward us. I don't know if that's clear, so these are not supposed to be the same degree angle. But you'll notice there's crosshairs right there in pencil. I can erase those. And on this template are lines that help you get all your various oh, and I made a mistake here just a minute ago. Oh, that's all right, we'll fix it. The mistake is these little lines are not supposed to be here. One of the characteristics of Prismacolor is that it does not erase very well. It's a wax-based pencil, right? So it really doesn't, but I'll erase it just a little bit, so that'll get easily fixed in the later stages. All right, so I think I'm done with this one. So I'm going to, as you can see, this is a 40-degree ellipse. Some of you didn't know that ellipses came in degrees, but they do, indeed. So I'm using the crosshairs now. Wow. They're not lining up. Which means when I drew my crosshairs, something was slightly off. All right, let me find a fairly sharp Prismacolor. See, so now those two ellipses should be concentric. Now down to the center of the hub. How big do I think the hub is? Pretty big on these old wagon wheels. But the end of the hub sticks out this way quite a bit from the I should have looked up more carefully. I think I'll actually use these hash marks as a starting point for the spokes. So it won't really matter if I don't erase them. I will anyway. The guidelines are drawn in pencil graphite, so I can erase those easily enough. Now, if this was really a technical illustration, I would be even more careful and precise and worried about getting all these spokes exactly placed. But it's not, I don't feel like it's quite that technical. So I'm just going to do a quick sort of poor man's version of getting the spokes right. I'm drawing them again in graphite, so these lines will erase very easily. They're just guidelines. Sharpen my pencil again. one time, when in my illustration career, fairly late 90s, I had a number of jobs which in some ways represented the high watermark of my technical illustration career. I was not a technical illustrator, I just mean I did some. For a number of years, on a tangent here, for a number of years I worked for a patent attorney way back in the 90s. And this is back in the days when patent illustrations, I'm assuming this has all changed now, but patent illustrations were actually still done by hand and in ink on Mylar. And to tell you the truth, I loved it. I just had a ball. But not the, I was going to start talking about the high water mark, if you will. Maybe it was a low water mark, who knows, of my the technical aspect of my illustration career. Oh boy, you guys, you know what? My wife is calling me, and she's called me twice now. Sorry, hang on, I better get that. Bye-bye. Hey, sweetie. Hello? Okay, I'm going to pause this real quickly, and I'll be back in a second. Real quick. All right, are we back? You guys are talking about something funny. Empanadas? Oh boy. That's funny. All right, so I'm back. Sorry for that interruption. Wife gets priority. Okay, so I'm basically done with that wheel. I just have to do a little bit of shading, and I'm ready to move on to the acrylics. Oh, I was starting to tell you about that just for fun. While I was drawing that wheel, it reminded me of the job where I did airbrush illustration, cutaway view, like X-ray view of several things. I did a boat, a big fishing boat, and a beverage truck and a beverage trailer for two different companies. And in the truck illustrations, I had to draw tires, and they were about, the drawing was about this big, and it was just, it was fun, but it was tedious. Now that the back wheel should be just almost right behind the other wheel, so I don't have to draw much of it. And I had to draw the tread in the tire. You know, the little black rubber zigzaggy marks. That's the technical term, zigzaggy marks, that make, you know, a tire. And oh my goodness, I bet I spent just in the line illustration stage, I probably spent 3 or 4 hours just drawing, you know, just a part of a tire, measuring, remeasuring, drawing, using all kinds of templates, rulers, and all kinds of things to make that. It was supposed to look like a photograph. Of course, it was supposed to be super realistic. Drawing this just a few minutes ago reminded me, brought back a memory, a mixed memory. Were those the best of times or the worst of times? Yes. generally I enjoyed it, as I still enjoy doing illustration today, as I usually mention. It's a nice break. It's a nice break from abstract realist oil painting. And frankly, it's a good bit easier than abstract realism oil painting, in my humble opinion. Do y'all know that in Texas they pronounce the word humble with the H is silent? They say humble. There may be way more than Texas, but that's the only part of the country that I know of where they say it. They also say, in most of the country, the expression, the word to err, E-R-R, to make a mistake. To make a mistake is to err. And in Texas, it's to err. At least people that I lived with. I spent 9 years of my adult life in Texas. Just little tidbits of information. You never know what you're going to pick up around here. I knew your day was incomplete till you had those little bits of Texas microculture explained to you. All right, I think I'm done. Yahoo! Done with that phase, that is to say, of course. So out with the templates, out with the black pencils, off with the glove. And we are going to do some painting. Oh, I hope I can get this. Oh, I was going to say, I hope I can get this jar open. And this palette, this plastic palette, is just, at the moment, just sort of a surface that I've used in the past, evidently, for the mixing of acrylics. Whoops, I don't think that blue's any good. I hope this blue's some good. Nope, that's not much good either. Oh, it's good enough, I guess. I'm just putting out a limited palette here to get on with my it's been too long since I used some of these acrylics, evidently. Oh, I should have an apron on, shouldn't I? I'm not wearing a painting shirt, which reminds me. Thanks for reminding me. It means roll up your sleeve, dummy. Okay, rolling the sleeve, rolling the sleeve. Nice shirt. While I'm at it, I'm going to stand up and put on an apron. Great visual there. And you can see a lot, can't you? Who's blessing whose heart? Well, of course, all across the South, we say y'all. Although I will say that I grew up, of course, up north, born in Canada. I grew up mostly in Michigan, a little bit of Ohio. And I still don't speak Southern like a Southerner, because when I use the word y'all, I only use it in the plural. That is to say, y'all is you all. But when a true Southerner, at least in much of the South, when they want to say plural, they will say all of y'all. That is to say, y'all is just one person. Y'all is one person. And all of y'all is more than one person. And that is a habit I have avoided. I can't bring myself to be quite that Southern. The term y'all, just fine with me. I think So this is gouache. This is how to open a bottle or a jar of acrylic. Yep, it worked. Good. This is almost black. I think I can just leave that there. Okay, I'm just going to be real simple with this project. I'm going to start with a blue sky. All of a sudden, I wish I had a phthalo blue instead of an ultramarine. Oh, too dark. So, did I explain again that the white here is... Did I say gouache? I might have said gouache a few minutes ago. No. It's not gouache. It's gesso. They both start with the letter G, so they get tangled in my brain. No, it's gesso. There we go. Not gouache. I'm sorry. I think I did say gouache. No, it is most certainly not gouache. It is gesso, and that's important because gesso has a tooth to it. It has traditionally, and should be, good gesso, it has marble powder in it, so it has a grit to it. And that grit is quite important for this technique, because the next thing that I'm going to do on top of this layer of acrylic, scratchy acrylic then, if you will, the next thing I'm going to do is a watercolor wash. And you can imagine that watercolor does not adhere to smooth acrylic paint. Does that make sense? So that's why I'm using gesso, gritty gesso in the acrylic so that it has a tooth to it, and then the wash will adhere to it. Again, it's a technique from C.F. Payne. If I ever get able to communicate with him, I will say, Chris, did you make this up yourself, or did somebody give it to you? Or did somebody, my guess is it's his own personal variation of something that somebody taught him. I remember I've read his biography several times, and you can read it too. Again, just C.F. Payne, illustrator. He's pretty famous, so you wouldn't have any trouble finding him. He majored in illustration, I think, in college, or trade school, whatever it was, college, I think. And he credits some of his teachers with being very influential. So it's very possible that one of those teachers are the source of this crazy technique. And whoever thought about think about it. Think about it a minute, in case you haven't already thought about it. Think about it. That's an order. I mean, even just so far, acrylic on top of colored pencil. That's a little strange. And then it gets a lot stranger. Then it goes to watercolor on top of I'm going to have to go to a smaller brush here in a second. And it goes to watercolor on top of the acrylic. And then in his technique, so after that, I'm going to pastel. In his technique, he does oil on top of the watercolor. I mean, that just breaks every rule in the book, doesn't it? But again, I'm not giving it an appropriate description at the moment. You can go look at my playlist, or just find it online, find a YouTube about him anywhere. And then he finishes after the oil layer. Both the watercolor and the oil, he lifts off. He does, you know, lifting off painting, reverse painting, negative painting, whichever you want to call it. Not by putting stuff on, but by taking, the oil covers the whole thing, just like the watercolor does. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's just stick with this at the moment. So I've ended up with a different color underneath the canopy that I have over it. That. That won't fly, will it? So let's fix that real quick. And I showed you some of the samples of what these illustrations are going to look like a few minutes ago. I'd be glad to show you that again in a little while. Okay, let's mix up something sort of brownish. And again, I've just got 3 primary colors here. I can zoom you in a little bit more than that, can't I? Hello.
Wi-Fi password or simple password?
Oh, Dan and Nancy 123. Capital D, capital N.
Dan and A and D?
Uh-huh.
Dan and Nancy.
123.
Capital D.
Oh, that's way too dark.
Okay, I've got the right one now.
You all know, the whole world knows our Wi-Fi password now. I suppose that means I have to go change it. Actually, you didn't know what that was. Nobody knew it until I just said it right then. Right? That was real. That was bright. That was bright of me. Okay, now, you're just beginning to see now what happens when you paint this translucent mixture. See, one of the characteristics of acrylics, for better or worse, is that they are not terribly opaque, right? If you're an acrylic painter, you've probably struggled. I was going to say cursed, but you probably struggled because acrylics, it's hard to get them to be opaque. So just sort of left to their native tendencies, they go on like this. So you could still see the penciled crosshatch shading right there, even though, albeit it is significantly diminished because, of course, it's got this. I really need to switch to a better brush. Okay, this went as long as I could. I think I have a little collection of really cheap brushes here just for stuff like this. Yes, I do. Really cheap brushes. Not the black ones, the blue ones I'm talking about. This is precisely what they're for. I'm afraid this is going to be a little bit boring for you guys, so forgive me. A little bit tedious. And now, of course, my brush is way too small. Hang on. I think I've got a nice damaged watercolor brush here. It was a nice brush, but now it's not nice anymore. So. come back with some lighter stuff here in just a minute. The idea, again, Chris's idea with this acrylic layer is it's very flat. It's just sort of like flat, local color. You don't worry really much at all about shading, blending, rendering, you know, realistic. It's very, very, very flat. And that's because all of the modeling, if you will, the roundedness, comes in the later stages. And there will be plenty of opportunity for shading and roundedness in those later stages. And as you can see, I'm not even worrying too much about being super, super precise. One of the tips, tricks of this technique is that when I'm finished with the acrylic layer, this entire illustration needs to be have acrylic on it. No, not even the pencil lines. All have to be covered up, not left showing. Does that make sense? So we're probably somewhere in the range of good enough here. And I may or may not turn those into trees later. We'll just decide that later. Now, color for horse. My printer ran out of ink when I did this one. It was a white and a brown horse, but I don't want to do that. We're going to do 2 brown horses. All right. So let's mix some brown again. Okay, I think this will be appropriate color for the far horse, so the chestnut brown. Nope, it's too dark. Boy, it looked a lot lighter than that on the palette. And yes, I'm covering up all the rigging, all the tack, all the bridle stuff. And again, you can see why it's important that the paint is translucent, not opaque, because if it were opaque, I would be losing all of that information. It's still a little too dark. Again, crazy technique, crazy. One of the genius, really maybe the genius part of this technique, and again, if you want some fun, just go and look, just Google CF Paint illustrations, hit image, and have yourself some good, uproarious, most of his stuff is caricature-ish, cartoon-ish, but hyper-realistic cartoons. If I can use a crazy description, hyper-realistic cartoons. That does not make any sense, does it? But when you see it, you go, oh yeah, that's what they are. And in that regard, not unlike some of my late pen and ink and airbrush cartoons. You know, very, very carefully, outrageously distorted figures, human figures, but very carefully rendered as if they appeared in real life. This is what they would look like. So I missed a bit of green right there. I'll fix that in a moment. So this is the way I think Chris would do this, is just a fairly flat color. One color for each horse. Not even worrying about avoiding the rigging, just going right over everything. We'll fix it, we'll do that later. Now the color of the wagon. Hang on, before I go any further, let me get that little bit of green that I missed right here. And is there any else that I missed? No, but I did miss some brown right here, so. Good enough. I want a little bit of color. One of the characteristics, again, for those of you who just perhaps joined me late, let me pick up a couple of my previous illustrations to show you the look that I'm aiming for. Here's one of the illustrations that was not used in the book. He didn't like, after telling me to, anyway, never mind. we changed my client's mind. This is a better example, I think. Part of the reason I picked this technique for this book is it's all set in, the book is set in the 1800s. And I wanted a sepia-ish look because that connotes oldness to people. So thus the brownish cast. That's also the reason I went with pastel, chalk pastel, pastel pencils to be exact. All right, let's do a little bit of color. I'm seeing that fringe is being goldish, aren't you? So let's do a goldish fringe. While I'm at it, I've got a goldish stuff. Yeah, let's do the handrails here, like wood. And this strip right down here. A more reddish brown, just making up colors. I looked up, wagons or whatever you call this, coach. That's not the word I'm looking for. What's the word I'm looking for? Buggy. That's the word I'm looking for. I looked up buggies, of course, before I did my sketches for my client. These right here are the manure bags. Y'all know about those, right? It sits right under the horse's tail. Much appreciated by everybody in town. Well, where did I put my spray bottle? Put it down somewhere. I'll have to pick up an emergency spray bottle. Oh, here it is. It's right in front of me. Okay, Major Coker. Sitting square and proud at the helm. I don't think buggies have helms, whatever you call the driving part of his buggy. Let's do some quick flesh tones. Again, even if something is supposed to be white in the final painting, if it's supposed to be white in the final painting, you have to paint it white with this acrylic mixture. Otherwise, when you do the layers on top of it, it will be a mess. Okay, let's just take care of these wooden wheels all in one fell swoop here. And all this stuff down here. I know this looks like fun to some of you. Like, ooh, paint messy. I'm just going to do the ceiling, a dull brown. Just touch of impatience working on me here. I think I started to say a while ago that part of the genius of Chris's technique is that it's so fast. It's illustrator's dream because it's a quick technique. I mean, quick is relative, of course. Quick for illustration. Which is pretty slow and meticulous compared to many of life's activities. So keep that in perspective. Fast for an art medium, we would have to say. And again, I've got to make sure that all the paper is covered. I mean, if I leave it, some of it, nobody will die, but but it will. It'll turn out a very different texture than the surrounding areas and may require extra work. I sure don't want that. All right, I think this seat is telling me it's black leather. So, whoops, there's no gesso in that paint. There we go. Missed another little bit of green right there. And Major Coker's beard is white, so I have to paint it white, not in his shirt and his hair. I can't leave them white. I need to paint them white. Right now, just the front. How about just one bright bit of red here? I think they liked to paint their buggies bright colors. And this is a fancy buggy, and a little bit of color on the girls. lavender. Whoops, there's little bits of daylight still talking to me. I'm being kind of crazy and creative now. Either that I've lost my mind, either one. All right, I think I'm finished. Now, I've made this mistake before, so I don't want to make it again. I am going to, I have to pause here for a few minutes, because I have to make sure this is completely dry before I do the watercolor wash, of course, or it'll pick up and be a disaster. So I'm going to pause here. Sorry to interrupt all your great encouragement. Barbara, you asked, will they use them exactly? Well, they'll probably use them exactly, but I scan them, of course, into my computer and tweak them in Photoshop myself. So I tweak the colors in that manner. I'm looking around a little bit, just want to make sure I haven't missed anything. I'm going to paint just a few more details in light anything, light beige, brown, tan. Again, I'm just dangerously messing around now. I don't plan to do much detail at all in the background of this painting. I want it to just basically fade, fuzz out. Yeah, I think that'll work just for this illustration. It's very focused on the subject at hand. I don't need to set it in a context, I don't think. A little bit of green, which I don't know if that's going to turn into trees or not. All right, little break time. Not very long. I'll be back, I'll just say, in 10 minutes. Okay, sorry for the break. Thanks for your company. See ya. Be back in a bit. All right, I think I'm back. I think this is dry. It feels scratchy, that's good. All right, and I pulled up my portrait watercolor kit, freshly taped to try to make the lid last a couple years longer. Okay, so these are the portraits. These are the watercolors that I use anytime I'm doing a portrait and watercolor. And you may ask, what's the difference? Well, two things. One, it's heavy in the browns and earth tones. It has a full range of other colors, but maybe not as many blues, although it's got plenty, and green. But the real issue is that these colors have all been carefully researched by me, no doubt by somebody else too, but I did the research on this, to make sure that they're all liftable, to make sure that I don't have any staining, dyeing, as in D-Y-E-I-N-G, dye colors in this. And they're all the colors, maybe you can see here in the real fine print, all the, what color they are and what brand they are, because different brands, of course, have different properties. Sepia umber, wow. So right at the moment, I just want a color, I think I'll know it when I see it. A dark, slightly reddish, that is more warm than cool brown. And there needs to be plenty of it. I think that's good right there. All right, so these are all colors that are not staining. That's why they're portrait, because sometimes when you do portraits, you want to lift out. All right, so this, let's hope this works. It's not quite dark enough. Let's get a little bit more. There we go. So yes, this is what I'm doing. I'm just covering the entire thing with a solid one wash of warm brown. And so far, this is the crisp paint technique. So as soon as I'm satisfied that it's a uniform glaze, I'll let it dry. I'll encourage it to dry with a hairdryer. In fact, that's probably good enough. Let's clean out that nice 3-inch brush. Not an expensive 3-inch brush, mind you, just nice enough. Okay, and forgive me here, I hate to do this noise to you, but I am going to run a hairdryer. You know what, can I turn you down? No, never mind. Here we go. Lovely sound, eh? You know what? I can do it on the low setting. More heat, less blow. There we go. Not quite so offensive to the earbuds. Oops. All right. Whew, thank goodness that's over. And by the way, it is interesting, isn't it? When I revert back into my illustrator mind, all thoughts of two-handedness go right out the window. I am back to my control freak self, aren't I? And that's just the way it is. All right. Now, if this doesn't look like fun to you, your wood's wet. Something's wrong. This is fun. Wow, look, I actually have this Winsor Newton Series 7 in that jar. It's a little bit old, but I think it'll do. All right. So what I do now is I start thinking about light source and roundedness and so on. And I begin lifting out getting back in some places. And I should have run downstairs during the break and gotten a fresh stash of Q-tips. I know we're not supposed to say brand names. Like we're not supposed to say Kleenex, even though in America that's what everybody says. Should say cotton swab. I think I'm going to pick up, hang on, nice new, so I don't have any contamination. Nice new silver brush, bristle brush, big bristle brush, so I can lift out. Now we're back to that old, again, I always hear, not you guys, but somebody, some squeaky person saying, well, why'd you put it on if you're just going to take it off? You can tell by my tone of voice that I have great compassion for the people who ask those questions. The answer is, of course, because we're not taking it all off, of course. We're taking it off piecemeal. I can't decide here if I want the brown to get browner. Here's one of my go-by illustrations. Yeah. This one, I kept the brown at the edge. Yeah, I sort of think that's the right impulse. Now, I think I'm going to have to cut this broadcast short for the simple reason that this is going to take a while. This layer, this phase, I think is, I don't know. We'll see. I'm just warning you or warning myself. I don't feel obligated necessarily to show you the whole sausage making mess. Yeah, definitely want it. Let's just take care of some of the big stuff right up for a sec. I know I want this foreground considerably lighter. So as you can see, I'm moving the watercolor around a little bit. Some insect is attacking me, guys. How in the world? Here in late November. Who's in my office? I'll be using, I think I will make a quick trip probably and get some Q-tips out of my wife's bathroom drawer. And I'll use essentially 3 tools: brushes, tissue, and cotton swabs, aka Q-tips. One of the main things that this technique does is it creates a very interesting texture. As you can imagine, there are irregularities that have accumulated. First there's the paper with slight irregularities, and then there's the acrylic paint with gesso in it that creates tiny irregularities, so that as I lift the watercolor off, a really interesting texture is created. And again, if you really want to see this, the class example is go to Chris Payne, CF Payne illustration, and you'll see that this very natural, I don't know how to describe a natural occurring texture, not one that you really could create, you know, with a pencil or a brush. It's the texture that is being created by the lifting out technique. So I'll tell you just a little bit more. I mentioned it very briefly. So Chris Payne, and also one of the other things that's happening, let me zoom in here real quick. So you can see just around the horses, there's kind of a ghosty halo, which in many times in artwork, that's a negative thing. You don't want, you know, but in this case, it looks kind of cool. In my opinion, and evidently in Chris Payne's opinion as well, that it's a fascinating look. So yes, I'm going to keep it. I like that. So let me describe some of the next step for Chris. After he does this, then, which I'm not going to do, but let me tell you his, just since we're here together, since you and I are having such a great time. In fact, he mixes 2 colors of oil paint. I've got them right here in this basket. They've just fallen down. I just want to show you, because it's a fun, again, you can find all this out on his website, but don't go there, you're here. So the 2 colors that he uses are permanent green and dioxazine violet. He mixes these together in pretty much equal parts, so you get a cool gray. The fact that it's cool is significant. So that's fat. You can get grays mixing many colors, but this is what Chris does, and I haven't tried to improve on that yet. And he uses Gamsol, terpenoid, you know, turpentine, whatever, as a medium, so to speak. And he just does a wash of oil paint. It's a wash of oil paint. That's almost an oxymoron, isn't it? Using medium, you know, brush cleaner as a medium. So it's very thin, like watercolor, but it's oil. Takes about an overnight. He likes to let it dry overnight, but if he's in a hurry, he can dry it with a hairdryer in an hour or so. I don't think he stands there with a hairdryer the whole time, but if he's in a hurry, he can get it dry one way or the other, and maybe in an hour, the oil, get it? Then the next step is he takes a kneaded eraser, a much needed eraser, and he rubs off the oil paint with a kneaded eraser. Isn't that crazy? By the way, I do have an illustration over here I can show you of a caricature of myself that I did using his technique all the way. It's got a drop of paint on it, that blue. Anyway, so there I am in my plastic enclosed glory. A caricature of myself done in style of CF Payne. And I mentioned earlier my technique late in my illustration career. I did a lot of, not a lot, I did some cartoon work like this. Brown ink, pen and ink, and airbrush. So that's just because I mentioned it a little while ago. That's the only reason I'm showing you that. All right, let's what do you say we just focus on the work here, hey? So, as is so often the case in the world of art, it's the incidentals and accidentals. It's the things that you don't control, can't control, that happen by accident that create the most charming effects. And again, that's a good way to describe this technique, because when you're lifting out, you don't have the same kind of control that you do when you're putting paint down, right? Like, you don't know exactly what this mark or that mark is going to look like. Let me try a bristle brush here for a minute. So I get a little bit more scratch. And so that's part of the fun. It's like things happen. And then, of course, you have to compensate for things that you don't like in the next layer, or do something to fix it, right? And I think I'm getting close to the point now that I should probably end this broadcast. I'm not sure that I'm going to finish this illustration tonight. I'll go for just a few more minutes anyway. Some of you are trying to get to sleep, and I'm helping you. Watch Dan Nelson. David says, show them the one with the old cars. Did I do an illustration with old cars? Or are you talking to somebody else, David? Hello, Brenda. And hi, Dan from Australia. Oh, good. You used this technique. What fun. That's really fun. And then Deborah, a.k.a. Michael Van Heusen. We're still talking about empanadas, food. Hello, Michael Jackson. Just wake up. Yeah, just wake up, you people that are trying to get to sleep. I really want to get over here to these girls and get some light going on them. So the technique, again, the technique that I'm going to use here is, when this is done, I'm going to take this outside, or to the garage if it's still raining. I'm going to spray it. I'm going to pray it. I'm going to pray. I'm going to pray over it. I'm going to spray it with a product called Lacquer Mat. And I don't think they even make Lacquer Mat anymore. I learned about Lacquer Mat 30 years ago from my old friend Drew Blair, who is the best airbrush illustrator in the world. Now, he really is a friend. C.F. Payne, I call him a friend because we met. We attended the same meeting several times back in the late 80s. But I'm not really a name dropper. It is, Drew and I really did hang out some. And he really is the best airbrusher. Right? Look him up too if you want. If you want to be blown away, D-R-U Blair, B-L-A-I-R. Let me know if you look him up. Let me know if you're blown away. Drew was one of the people in my life who said to a group of artists, he said, quality, something like, quality is measured by similitude. How else can you judge it? In other words, if art is realistic, then it's good. Of course, I disagreed with him at the time, disagree now too, but what's what I want? Not in a way that matters. You know, like if you can paint the way Drew Blair does, that's just good for you. Good for you. And I feel the same way about my true good friend, David Stickle, Stickoo-el or L-E. He's such a good friend, I can spell his last name backwards. Stickle, David Stickle, Stickle, I think. He lives right here in Chapel Hill, about 40 miles from me. And a hyper-realist watercolor painter who's won all kinds of awards everywhere. Poor fella had to fly to Moscow this summer to pick up some kind of international watercolor prize. So there's no envy in me, no sirree, Bubba. None. And David's like the nicest guy in the world. And then after I spray lacquer mat, which smells horrible. That's why I never use that stuff indoors, honestly, never. It's bad. Anyway, after I spray lacquer mat, then I break out the pastel pencils. In fact, to show you, just in case you don't get here for the grand finale, or in case I do it without you. So here's my modest collection of pastel pencils. I'll occasionally, like there's a pastel stick, I'll grab a few pastel sticks out of my pastel collection too, but most of the work, most of the fine work we done in pastels. So you're beginning to see some of the charm of this approach. The texture that's left on the page, that will be greatly exaggerated with the spray and the spray and the what are those pencils called? Pastel pencils. You know, more texture to come, but you're beginning to see, again, as I said, some of the charm, the lifting out technique creates just interesting texture, interesting patterns, not quite under the control of the artist. Does that make sense? And what was a very liney illustration, as you can see, is now significantly subdued. The lininess is subdued, and will be even more so with the use of the pastels. I should say some of the lines will be reduced, and then some of the defining lines, the definitive correct lines, if you will be redrawn with, in fact, okay, let me really get down to it. Okay, after doing pastel, then I actually, on these illustrations, you can tell I came back with a black pencil and re-emphasized any outline that I wanted to. And on this illustration, I did it everywhere, around the boys, around the trees, around the cloud. And then the final thing I did was white gouache highlights. So I'll probably do that also on this illustration. But really, the fun of it is the charm that is achieved by the accidents. I think that's what really makes it fun. Is the accidental stuff that happens. Looking here for a smaller brush. So these girls need some light on their faces. They're in shade, of course, but I don't want them quite that dark. All right. Fair enough, fun enough, good enough for now. I'm going to end this broadcast, and if I decide to do anything exciting tonight, I will by all means bring you guys back in. If I feel like what I'm doing is boring, then I'll do it by myself. Okay? Thanks again for all your fun. Yeah, it is. It is an old-fashioned looking painting, Susan. Thank you for getting that. David, thank you for asking me about the Mevo, the new Mevo camera. No, but I finally succeeded today in getting the old one shipped off. So, Yahoo, better broadcast days are coming. And generally, as long as I stay at home, my broadcast quality, lately, isn't that funny? Well, I tell you what happened. I discovered that I obeyed the company, and I upgraded. What do you call it? You know, update when they update their app. You know, and that's when all kinds of bad things started happening. Then when I did a factory reset on my camera, that dialog box came up again. Do you want to upgrade your software? And now I go, no. So for some reason, things got much worse with that upgrade. So I know, thankfully, broadcast quality has been better in the last couple of weeks when I'm at home, not when I'm out on the street. Anyway, so Yahoo, I have a new camera on the way because my old camera is finally being shipped out today. All right, you guys, it's been great fun. I appreciate your company. Don't you guys have jobs? No, Barbara, she's got a good excuse. She's painting. The rest of you, anyway, I don't care why you're here. I just appreciate you here. Thanks, y'all. Love you. Bye.